Chapter 112, Antony's Boat Ride, Antony's POV. "Careful with his head, Sinisa," Julia shouted. Antony stood a few feet behind her and tried not to let his nervous shifting and twitching show too plainly as the big vampire maneuvered Titus's unresisting form into a gently swinging rowboat. It turned out that Titus was mobile, though he showed no autonomy in his movements. He walked obediently where he was led. Julia was pleased by even that much, though she admitted that bed sores and atrophied muscles were probably impossible for their kind anyway. For an operation as delicate as getting her patient into a boat that dangled a few inches from the edge of the lower launching deck, however, she'd been unwilling to trust to his dexterity. She instead ordered Sinisa to carry him, which Titus submitted to without the slightest change of expression. From the annoyed way Julia was barking orders at her new underling, Antony suspected that she would have preferred to have Felix do all this. He and Iovita, however, were already busy with their impromptu census. "Gods, I hope this registry idea works." Once Sinisa and Titus were situated to her satisfaction, Julia sprang into the boat herself and began lowering it towards the water. Her sudden departure with his sick brother shook Antony from his worried reflections. "Wait!" He sprang forward. "What about me?" Julia didn't even pause in her movements. Her boat splashed into the water just as a big, familiar hand settled on Antony's shoulder. "You're riding with me," Theo said. That made sense. There wasn't much room left in Julia's boat anyway. Despite his sudden reluctance to be alone with Theodora, Antony could see the sense of the decision. She was blessedly silent as they clambered into a second boat and splashed into the sea. But when she started rowing, the boat moved away from both ships, towards the island. "What are you doing?" Antony demanded, his chest itching strangely as he twisted to try to keep his brother's still form in view. Theo was unrepentant. "I promised Julia I'd keep you out of her hair for at least an hour while she checks him in her own infirmary and gets him situated. You just get in the way. We'll go to the island and get that tank for Thad and some books and shit. Anyhow, you and I need to talk." "But, Titus!" "Yes, that's what we need to talk about." Her voice was grim, miserable. "I could still jump out of the boat, swim to the ship, and avoid this conversation. But for how long?" Antony sighed, feeling defeated. He forced himself to turn around and sit properly in the boat, relinquishing the sight of his brother. "Do you think it's safe to have him on board?" Theo asked. "I don't... Damn! I can't believe I'm asking if our offerings will be safe with Titus around. But where can we keep him safely? What if he snaps out of it and wants to pick up where he left off?" Antony dropped his head in his hands and groaned. He hadn't even thought of that. He'd pictured keeping Titus in his own rooms, tenderly nursing him back to health. But with Hanyu and Asao there... "Are we going to have to imprison him?" he asked wretchedly. "Gods, we are, aren't we? We're going to have to keep our sick baby brother behind bars." Theodora sounded just as unhappy. "I think so. I'd die for him. You know I would. He's Titus. But if I had to kill him to protect my friends, I would do it. I'm responsible for them." Antony jerked his head up again, on the verge of snapping at her. How could she even say that? How dare she threaten Titus? Was she really saying she would choose her little harem over their brother? The misery on her face killed the words before they could leave his mouth. She was right. Her humans were her responsibility, her family. As had been made so appallingly clear, Titus was a stranger. He was a stranger tied to a beloved memory, but a stranger nonetheless. If he threatened Hanyu, could I? Would I? Antony didn't care to pursue that train of thought, so it was a relief when Theo burst out, "Gods, Antony, this is so fucked up. Can you believe it?" "No," he admitted, shoulders slumping. "Even after hearing all that from their own mouths, I still don't quite believe it, I think." "How did this happen?" Thea was scowling fiercely into her lap as she rowed, muscles bunching in her broad shoulders. Oars moved so quickly that they practically flew over the water. How did he manage to hide it from all of us? He didn't. Antony's stomach tilted queasily, and he knew it wasn't from their rapid boat ride. He must have mentioned it to me 100 times, but I thought it was just talk. Theo gasped. He told you? Seriously? Why didn't you make him stop? He's been killing them. Who knows how many he's murdered by now? Why didn't you stop it? I thought it was just more of his boasting, Antony protested. You know how he is. Right. Theo's lip twisted in a way he'd never seen it do before, making her look hard and almost contemptuous. Of course, because you've decided that you're the worst person in the world, so it's impossible that anyone would do something that you would balk at. Antony felt a little dazed by the shift in the conversation. Where did this come from? Of course I don't think I'm the... What does this have to do with anything? I've had just about enough of your stupid, indulgent self-loathing, Antony, she cried. It doesn't help or atone for anything, and you're not the only one who suffers from it. It leaves you with some massive blind spots. You told me with your own mouth that Marcus wouldn't treat Asao the way he treated you, and if you think I didn't hear the silent part where you left off saying, because Asao doesn't deserve that, but I do, then I fucking do deserve it, and I will make you see why. He only hurt Asao because of how I was treating him, Antony interrupted. I ignored him, and I suppose you torture defenseless slaves every time you feel a little sorry for yourself, she spat. No, of course not, or we'd be permanently out of offerings. You're a self-absorbed asshole. You would rather wallow in Malden's self-hatred than actually fix any of the situations you hate yourself for. That was all true. And it felt unexpectedly good to hear her admit it. Finally, he could stop waiting for her to say how she really felt about him. It was all out in the open, and Antony felt like he could truly relax with her for the first time since the curse. She hates me. She finally admitted it. That's as it should be. But then she kept talking. And be that as it may, you are still not the worst person there is, Antony. You're certainly no butcher. I couldn't love you so much if you wanted to hurt people. What the fuck? Her harsh truths had felt bracing and right, but when she made excuses for him, it sent a spike of rage right through his skull. Of course I want to hurt people. You've seen me when we fight the desert tribes. And you've seen me. Her chin jutted stubbornly. I sink into the blood madness too. Even Thad and Felix do. There's something animal inside all of us ever since the curse. I don't pretend that any of us are good anymore. We've done too many unforgivable things for that. But that doesn't excuse us from trying to be better during the vast majority of time when we're not battle-wild. Or don't you think there's any difference between Cloelia and Marcus? Antony snorted. Of course there is, but we're not talking about them. We're talking about Titus. No, we're talking about you, about how you have flaws, huge ones, massive, but how you are also decent and generous and funny and willing to twist yourself into the most absurd knots to avoid causing anybody pain, and how your pig-headed belief that you are the scum of the earth leads you to think that if you wouldn't do some horrible thing, no one else would do it either. If it were possible, Theo was rowing even faster in her agitation. Antony realized that they had approached the island already, and, rather than docking, she was rowing them around the edge. Presumably, she planned to go around and around the desolate place in a circle until either sunrise threatened or she was done with this hellish conversation. So much for the tanks and pencils. How to answer her charges? On the one hand, she wasn't entirely wrong. Antony supposed that she had a point. He'd been hopelessly, tragically blind when it came to his brother. On the other hand, he could always quibble over her semantics. I wish you would stop being so hyperbolic, he complained, almost wincing at the childish sulkiness in his tone. I don't actually think I'm the worst person in the world. Theodora's eyes narrowed. Go on. Tell me someone who's worse than you. Someone who would do things you wouldn't. Give me a name. Oh. Oh, fuck. That was unexpectedly tricky. He knew she wanted him to say Marcus, but that wasn't true. Marcus might have done the actual killing, but Antony had let it happen, which was worse. As for Titus and his crew, well, we've established that Titus would, but that... Antony hedged, then hesitated. I mean, he only did it because Because you nothing, she snapped. You didn't make him murder his offerings, Antony. If you would stop a moment and actually think about it, you might notice that you have been on an entirely different ship during all of his massacres. You should have believed him and tried to stop him, yes, but you didn't choose this for him. The rage rose up out of nowhere like a wall of flames, hot and blinding and pitiless, and Antony could almost feel his tongue burning from its abrupt heat as he spat the next words at her. You know I fucking chose this for him! I chose it for all of us! Everything was silent for a moment. Antony realized hazily that he'd shot to his feet. The boat rocked wildly at his motions, and his chest heaved with quick, unnecessary breaths. He stared defiantly down at Theodora, who had stopped rowing. Go on. Come up with a rebuttal for that. We both know you can't. Every drop of blood we spilled since the night of the curse is on my head. I'm more responsible for Titus or Marcus's sins than they are. Yours too. All of them. 100 years of murders committed by nearly 100 hands, and all of them can be laid at my feet. We're monsters because of me, and nothing can ever change that. She stared up at him, eyes wide and startled, and, horribly, growing soft, she opened her mouth to speak. Oh, gods, she's going to make excuses for me, Antony thought in a sudden panic. She's going to lie and say it wasn't my fault. All thought ceased when he heard a strange sound from the direction of the island. It was so faint that he could barely make it out, but Theo had heard it too. She swiveled on her rower's bench, sharp eyes scanning the dark landscape beside them. It came again. Now that they were listening, it was unmistakably a scream. There! Theo pointed an oar at a speck of light on the island. Almost as soon as she gestured to it, it was gone. A torch? No one but a human would have needed to take a torch. Why is he so far from the storeroom entry? Why is there a human at all? And why is he screaming? Theodora gestured with her paddle. You go and make yourself useful. I promise that actually helping people feels better than brooding about not having helped them. Antony nodded. Frankly, it was almost a relief to have an excuse to dive into the sea and swim as fast as he could away from this conversation. Whatever idiot human defied my orders and came here to go wandering around and break his fool leg on the rocks, he's lucky I needed this escape. I'll ask his master to go easy on him. If he doesn't have a master, I'll waive any discipline and tell everyone that whatever injury he's screaming about is punishment enough. Between the fall and the scare of me being the one to show up and help him, it'll scare the foolish, reckless curiosity right out of him. A cold, premonitionary shiver went through Antony's body, one that had nothing to do with the frigid seawater he swam through, and everything to do with the phrase foolish, reckless curiosity. He didn't examine the feeling. It wasn't even worth considering. But he swam faster.